A black woman walks down a busy city street, minding her own business, when a police officer suddenly steps in her path. His eyes narrow as he looks her up and down, suspicion etched on his face. Without cause, he demands her identification, his tone sharp and condescending. As she calmly questions his reasoning, his hostility grows. The officer grips his baton, ready to assert his authority. Pedestrians glance over but keep walking, unsure whether to intervene. Little does the officer know, he has just made a grave mistake. This woman is no ordinary civilian, and she is not alone. The woman remains still, her posture composed but unyielding as she meets the officer's glare. Her pulse is steady, though she can feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her. Around them, the city hums with life. Cars passing, distant conversations, the occasional honk of a horn. But here, in the small space between them, time feels frozen. "I need to see some ID," the officer repeats, his voice sharper this time, as if he's already decided she's a problem. She tilts her head slightly, studying him. "And what's the reason for the stop?" Her tone is measured calm. The officer scoffs, shifting his stance to block her path. "I don't have to explain myself to you. You fit the description. There it is." The phrase she's heard too many times before. The phrase that allows suspicion to be enough, that lets a hunch turn into harassment. She exhales slowly, her fingers tightening slightly around the strap of her bag. "I fit the description," she repeats, her voice quieter now. "And what description is that exactly?" The officer's eyes flicker with irritation. He's not used to being questioned. "Ma'am, don't make this difficult," he says, reaching for his belt, where his hand hovers near his baton. The weight of his authority presses against the air between them. A few people have stopped to watch now, hesitant onlookers sensing the tension but unsure whether to step in. Some pull out their phones, recording silently from a distance. The woman notices but keeps her focus on the officer. "I'm not making this difficult," she says, her voice unwavering. "I'm asking you a question." The officer's patience snaps. His hand moves. "Turn around," he orders. "Now." She doesn't move right away. She studies him for a moment longer, and then, with a sigh that holds no fear, only quiet exasperation, she speaks. "You really don't know who I am, do you?" The officer's fingers tighten around his cuffs, but there's a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, a small crack in his confidence, because something about the way she says it, so sure, so composed, makes him wonder if he's just made a terrible mistake. Before the officer can snap the cuffs around her wrists, a sharp voice cuts through the air. "Step away from her." "Now." The officer hesitates, his hand still hovering over his belt, as he turns to see a group of men and women in dark suits approaching with swift precision. Their movements are controlled, their eyes locked onto him with a silent warning. The badge on one of their lapels gleams under the streetlights. Secret Service. The realization crashes over him like a tidal wave. His face pales as he slowly lets go of her arm, his confidence draining as quickly as it had swelled. The officer takes a slow step back, his confidence unraveling with each passing second. The agents move in seamlessly, forming a protective barrier around the woman as she calmly adjusts the sleeve of her blazer, as if shaking off the encounter like an afterthought. One agent, taller than the rest, steps forward, his voice controlled but firm. "You just laid hands on a protected individual," he states, his gaze unwavering. The cop swallows hard, his bravado fading into nervous energy. I didn't know," the officer stammers, his hand still hovering near his belt, as if he's unsure whether to reach for his radio or keep his hands where they can be seen. The onlookers who had once stood idly by now murmur among themselves, some raising their phones to capture the moment. The woman finally speaks, her voice smooth but laced with disappointment. And yet, you didn't need to know who I was to treat me with respect. The silence that follows is deafening. The officer's jaw tightens, but he has no words. He knows the damage is done. One of the agents exchanges a glance with the others before turning back to the cop. "You'll be hearing from Internal Affairs." The weight of those words settles heavily on his shoulders. As the agents guide the woman away, the crowd slowly disperses, but the moment lingers. The officer stands frozen, his heart pounding as a realization sets in. His career may never recover from this. And in that moment, he finally understands what so many before him had tried to deny. Power unchecked will always face consequences. If you like to hear a story like this, don't forget to subscribe and follow for more.